Back in 2007, shortly after my 15th birthday, my mom was out of town for a few days on a business trip. We lived alone in a small house in a neighborhood that was on the sketchier end of decent, and that fact combined with my mother's paranoia about me being home alone longer than 4 or 5 hours meant that I had to stay over at a friend's house while she was gone. My friend lived across the street and over one house from my own. The place my mom was going to was only about 2 hours away, and I had gotten a bug up my ass about being treated like the young woman that everyone kept calling me. So the week leading up to the trip, I was bitching and moaning about being old enough to take care of myself, and insisting that I could just check in with my friend's parents every now and then. But in truth, my house was pretty creepy at night, even when my mom was there. And I found out the day that my mom was scheduled to leave that my friend had somehow gotten her hands on a PS3, so it didn't take me too long to get over being unfairly babysat. At around 11 on the last night I was there, we ended up back in my friend's room screwing around with the brand new flip phone that I had gotten for my birthday. Her parents had gone out hours earlier, after buying us a pizza for dinner, and probably wouldn't be back for at least another hour. We had gotten bored downstairs with her one PS3 game that we had been playing for days already. It turns out that she had the PlayStation, but didn't have any money to buy multiple games for it. It was too late to call any of our friends, but I knew that my mom would be coming home the following morning at some ungodly hour. And I knew that she had this thing about our answering machine. No matter how tired she was, no matter where she had gotten back from, if there were any messages on the answering machine, she would listen to all of them. Being bored 15-year-olds, my friend and I decided to leave a message or two for my mom to find in the morning. We called my home phone and put it on speaker, cracking up and trying to figure out what our message was going to say. It normally took 5 rings for the call to go to the machine, but on the 3rd ring, someone picks up. "Hello?" The voice sounded like it belonged to some 60-year-old man who had been smoking for at least 40 years of his life. But even past that, there was this malice in his voice. I can't quite describe it exactly, but it sounded very cold and very dangerous. The sort of voice where if you heard it on the street, you would want to stay away from that person. I looked at my friend. Her eyes were huge and her face went completely pale, and I'm sure that mine didn't look any better. Neither of us could get it together and say anything in response. "Hello?" The voice came again, and I tried to speak out something along the lines of, "Who the hell are you, and why are you in my house?" But then the man spoke again, in a very low voice. "You shouldn't have called." There was some sort of slam, and the phone line disconnected. I immediately dropped my phone and proceeded to freak the fuck out, and so did my friend. She asked me if I knew who that was, and I said no. Of course I didn't know the creepy-ass guy answering my phone at 11 o'clock at night. We checked the call log to see if we had accidentally dialed the wrong number. But no, it was the correct number. We were so shaken up that we couldn't immediately figure out who we should call or what to do. Should we call the cops or my mom, or run around the house to make sure that all the doors and windows were locked? We ended up multitasking, sprinting around my friend's house, double-checking every lock we could, while gasping into the phone at my friend's parents about what was going on. They were about 15 minutes away and said that they would call the police. Her mother told us to stay in the house with all the doors locked and all the lights on, just in case the intruder was going from house to house. And so for the next 10 minutes, we were huddled in the far corner of my friend's room, basically under her bed, jumping every time the house settled. You can imagine how freaked out we were when her parents came rushing in and started rattling at her bedroom door. Forgetting that it was locked on their orders. The cops got to my house not long after her parents arrived home, and to be honest, I don't really remember a lot of the specifics about what the cops were doing, mainly because I refused to set foot outside of my friend's house. But I remember that they asked my friend and I a lot of questions, and we really couldn't give them a whole lot of information. Unfortunately, we called from my friend's room, which was located in the back of her house, was away from where we would have been able to see my house. And some dude with a creepy smoker voice isn't a very helpful description to go off of when you're looking for someone. One question that stuck out to me though, because I remember thinking of how weird it was for them to ask this, was who had the keys to my house. I told them that only my mother and I had the keys. I found out later that the reason they asked was because there were no signs of forced entry anywhere around the house, and the front door was wide open when they got there. There appeared to be nothing missing, but our wall-mounted corded phone was hanging off its hook, and the phone base itself was cracked, like someone had slammed the phone down on the receiver too hard. Both my mom's room and my room also had stuff moved around and displaced. Someone had gone through our drawers. They got a hold of my mom at some point during all this, and she managed to get home that night, very tired and very freaked out about what happened. The cops investigated the incident, but never came up with any answers. We weren't doing too well financially at this point, but we still managed to move across town within a few months of this happening. For the months between that night and the day we moved, while I barely got any sleep and had these awful nightmares, I also flat out refused to be alone in the house, even for a couple of minutes, and I began to get very obsessive about checking and double-checking all the locks, a habit which has stuck around since this happened. Now that I've been writing this all out, I remember that there was one thing that I haven't told anyone, mostly because at the time, I thought the whole thing might have been blamed on me if I had said anything. Earlier in the day of the incident, I had gone back over to my house to get a notebook that was full of writing I wanted to show my friend. Nothing was obviously wrong as far as I could tell. The front door was locked when I got there, and there were no signs of any tampering, no noises from any part of the house. But the minute I stepped inside, I felt that something was just off. Really off. It was almost too quiet, if that makes sense. I was getting chills up and down my spine, and goosebumps all over. I tried to will myself just to get over it, and go to my room and grab my notebook, but I couldn't make myself take more than a few steps into the house. I was too creeped out. I locked the door and ran back across the street. I've thought back on that moment a lot, wondering if maybe I accidentally left the door open when I left, but there was no way. I distinctly remember turning the deadbolt back in place. When I returned to my friend's house, I felt like an idiot for being such a wimp that I couldn't walk through my own house even when it was empty. But looking back now, well, who knows? Perhaps my gut feeling is what saved me that day. It freaks me out thinking what would have happened to me if I had gone any further into the house. The situation started back in 2008 during my senior year of high school. I woke up late one night to my phone ringing. I looked at my clock and wondered who could be calling me at 4 o'clock in the morning. The caller ID said it was a private number. Thinking that this was just some automated call, I didn't answer and went back to sleep. Whoever it was didn't leave a voicemail, so I didn't think much of it. Until these calls started to become more frequent. Fast forward to my freshman year of college. These calls started happening almost every night, always around 4 a.m. I never answered them, just because answering an unknown caller has always creeped me out. It definitely wasn't an automated caller either. It was deliberate. I remember being called 3 or 4 more times after not answering the first time. At this point, I was starting to get a little pissed off because I'm a student who has classes at 8 a.m., and whoever this was needed to stop disrupting my sleep and leave me alone. So one night, when the calls came, I finally answered. "Hello? Who is this?" No response. "Please stop calling me. I think you have the wrong number." I then heard menacing laughter. Followed by incoherent rambling. Even though I couldn't understand what was being said, it sounded threatening. It gives me the chills just thinking back on it. "Look, whoever you are, you have the wrong number. Please stop calling me." I then hung up. I'm thinking this guy is probably just some drunk, because I couldn't understand a word he said. It was just the way he said it really got to me. I got a gut feeling that this guy was someone I never wanted to meet in person. Ever. And that's when I began to wonder if I had a stalker on my hands. I really became paranoid about it. The calls continued for months. They were so frequent that I ended up turning off my phone at night so I could sleep. I never thought about calling the police because I didn't have a number to go by. I was always very aware of my surroundings from that point on, though. Being in a third-floor apartment helped, but still, this entire situation was getting to me. During Christmas break of that year, I went home to Memphis, Tennessee. It was nice to take a break from school and just relax for a change. But early one morning, I get a call from the private number again, except this time, it wasn't 4 a.m., it was around 8 or 9. I answer, and I'm ready to go off on this guy. "Who the hell is this? Leave me alone." I then heard a deep male voice respond, "Are you going to meet me?" This was the only coherent thing I had ever heard from this caller. So in shock, I respond, No, I don't know you," in the most chilling voice I had ever heard. He said, "I know where you live. I'll be there soon." This is the part where I completely flip out. I'm in full-out panic mode. I rush to my parents' room and wake them up. I'm on the verge of tears and I tell them what happened. Obviously, they were very concerned and shared my theory about me having a stalker, and I'm wondering how this guy could possibly know me. Should I call the police? And if so, what do I tell them? My father was in the military, so he's up immediately, grabs a gun from under his bed, and starts keeping an eye out for mysterious cars driving around outside. I was too petrified to get any more sleep that night. Sorry if this seems anticlimactic, but thankfully, nothing else happened after that day. I decided that if I got another call from him, I would go to my phone company and see if they could trace his number and report him to the police, but the calls just stopped altogether, and I haven't gotten another one since. I've always wondered if it was someone messing with me, but from the way he said, "I know where you live. I'll be there soon," it didn't sound like he was messing around. It sounded threatening. I can't help but wonder if he thought he was calling someone else, someone that he knew, and he was going to go over to that person's house and do something terrible to them. I really hope it wasn't some other girl who just happened to sound like me. If it was, I really hope she's okay. But the way the calls just stopped completely makes me think otherwise. For some background information, I'm a female, and about 2 years ago, I had to go to a psychiatric facility so I could deal with some depression issues. At the time, I was 14. I had been in the hospital for 3 days when this all started. One morning, I woke up with an awful stomach ache and convinced the nurses to let me stay in from the activities and sleep off the pain. So while I'm alone in the hospital, my room phone begins ringing. I run over to it and answer it, thinking it could be my boyfriend or my parents calling. But instead it's a man's voice I didn't recognize. "Can I talk to Sandra?" "Sorry, there's no Sandra here." "Oh, alright, thanks. Who is this?" The voice sounded a lot like my friend's dad, who I had just met the night before during visiting hours. I told him my name, figuring he would recognize it. "So what are you in there for?" That's personal." This conversation was starting to raise red flags for me, because I had told my friend's dad why I was there the night before. "Did you fight to get in there? Beating up other girls?" I said no, and I was quickly becoming creeped out. It took me a minute, but I realized that there was no Sandra at this hospital. I wasn't really sure on everyone's names, but I'm pretty sure there was no Sandra there. Now I was starting to get very uncomfortable, and I told him that I had to go, and that was it. Visiting hours came around, and another phone call comes in for me. It was a man asking for me by name, claiming to be my father. But here's the thing, my dad was sitting right next to me. I explained that the caller had contacted me earlier, and my dad was pissed. He went over to the phone and demanded to know who was calling. The man didn't say anything and hung up. After a couple more calls came in asking for me by name, I informed the hospital staff, and they became very concerned and discontinued phone calls altogether. Apparently, a convicted rapist had been calling the mental hospital for years, getting names of the girls who answer the phone. He then uses whatever information he learns from the girls and then calls back posing as their father or boyfriend. Apparently, he had even tried to pick up patients a couple of times. The weirdest part is, when you call the hospital, you have to know the birthday of the patient, or the staff won't put the call through. So he somehow knew a bunch of information about the patients there, and used it to prey on us. It definitely freaked me out at the time, seeing as he's the one who should have been in the hospital. Oh, and one last thing. The guy is definitely not my friend's dad. He just happened to have a similar voice, I guess. It was late when I stumbled into my apartment last night, trying to be as quiet as I could, but managing to bang into damn near everything, cringing at each thing I knocked over. I groped my way through the dark into my bedroom. It must have been 2, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. The bar was closed, that's for sure. I stripped down to my boxers and tried to crawl into bed as quietly as I could. My girlfriend would definitely be pissed off at me arriving home at this ungodly hour. But thankfully, she didn't stir. I slunk down into the pillow, eyes dreary, breath heavy. I was nearly asleep, spinning away into a dream when my phone began vibrating. I let out a groan before rolling over to the side of the bed and reaching for my phone. But when I looked at the screen, I was confused. It was my girlfriend's number. She must have left it at a friend's house and they were calling my phone to let me know. So I answered it. Hello?
Hey babe, I just got home. Could you help me bring in the laundry?
What the? It was my girlfriend's voice, but I turned my head to the huddled body lying next to me. My mind ran through infinite scenarios of what unimaginable horror awaited me underneath those sheets. It is a very cold and unnerving feeling when you find out that the person lying next to you in bed was not who you thought they were. With my stomach in my throat and my eyes wide with terror, I grabbed a handful of blanket and snatched it away. My girlfriend moaned into consciousness and stared at me, confused. I shined my phone's light in her face to make sure she wasn't some sunken-eyed specter. But no, she just looked really pissed off when she saw my eyes wide and my mouth open. I bet I looked pretty stupid.
You stupid drunken asshole, go to sleep.
She seethed and smacked me with a pillow. She then kicked my side a few times, grumbled some obscenities, and flipped over toward the wall. Yep, that's definitely her. I must have hung up the phone during the commotion, because it began vibrating again. I jumped a bit, my nerves still a bit frayed. It was her number again. I answered.
Hey babe, I just got home. Could you help me bring in the...
I hung up right away. It sounded exactly like her, but she was lying in bed right next to me. Her basket of folded clean clothes was in the corner of the room. I remember her bringing it home earlier, and I reluctantly dragged it all up the stairs for her. I crawled over to the window and with 2 fingers separated the blinds so I could peer through. I scanned the lot for her car, and I saw it directly below our bedroom. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat. They looked nearly identical to her. The longer I stared, the more it sank in that there was something very, very off here. I then began to notice slight differences. Her neck seemed too long, her shoulders much too narrow, and her head was too thin. It was like once it realized its disguise failed, that it began to show its true form. Her face began to twist to the side, all the while a toothy grin stretched wider and wider, until it was touching both ears. Her large eyes had turned black and were staring straight forward into the steering wheel. Suddenly, her face snapped upwards. Her black eyes were now staring into my window. She raised a misshaped hand to her head, and my phone began to vibrate once more. I had been staring in shock and complete disbelief at what I was seeing. The light buzzing in my hand jolted me back to reality. All the air left my lungs, and I collapsed next to my girlfriend, which caused her to wake up again. Still in a tired stupor, I grabbed her by the arm and pulled her over to the window. Look inside your car," I whispered, nearly in tears. She looked around for her car, and then she saw it.
What the?
She began to speak, looking very worried. Her expression changed into a twisted grimace of pure terror. She suddenly began shrieking and sobbing hysterically. She shoved her head into my side, my arms pulling her close to my abdomen. We were like a couple of frightened children. I was unable to look away from the window. I watched as the thing inside her car opened the door, and power walked away with unnatural speed. It headed toward the forested lake to the left of the apartments. However, it kept its head toward us the whole time, its neck bending gruesomely backwards as the rest of its body strutted away. It wasn't grinning anymore. It was frowning, almost like it was sad. We must have tired ourselves out from all those surges of adrenaline, because right after it vanished into the dark, I remember waking up in the daylight. My girlfriend was still tangled in my arms. Both of us slumped on each other. I checked my phone to see what time it was, and saw that I had 16 missed calls, all between the times of 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. We hadn't tried calling each other since yesterday afternoon, I still have no idea how her phone had been used like that. It was plugged in next to her the whole night, and there weren't any outgoing calls from her phone to mine. What's even stranger, though, is that when she checked her phone, she had 18 missed calls, but from my number. Each one, same as mine, was made between the time of 1 and 7 a.m. I didn't really know what to say to her, so I blurted out, "Well, I guess that means no more late-night taco runs for a while." Neither of us laughed.
There's always a reason to be afraid.